Hi everybody, and welcome back to 7th Circle Gaming. Today on the channel we're talking about Bravely Default 2, as if the title card didn't give the mystery away. Now, let's jump right in with full disclosure. Pause the video now and read through these if you like, or we'll jump right in with Immersion. What is the game going to do to attempt to pull players into the game world? The game is going to use a couple of methods to attempt to pull players into the game world. First of which, the game is going to use challenge. Each combat instance represents a tactical and a light strategic challenge for the player to overcome. The game also will be using presentation to pull players into the game world, and this game uses all of the perspectives. At different times throughout the game is going to be using side-scrolling, third-person, item, and it's also going to be telling its story through a sort of comic book, visual novel style perspective. In general, the art style could be described as anime, cartoon, and watercolor. Now, the game, as we alluded to, is going to use story to get players invested into the game world as well, which basically means that the in-game events are presented as part of a larger plot. The game will be using lightly player agency. What we mean by that is that players are going to get the opportunity to shape the growth of the characters and what particular jobs, professions that the NPCs or the party members adopt. All of the customization, the visual customization, will be attached to their profession. The player, any sort of caps, boots, etc., will not be reflected in the player model. Weapons will. One interesting thing that the game is going to do that affects immersion is that players will, or monsters will run or flee from overleveled parties. The game also does an interesting little trick here, and this is something that's highly subjective, but we'll talk about that more a bit later. So, for its immersion score, the game is earned a 7 out of 15. And just to illustrate some of our points, let's move on to the screenshots. First of which is the town, village, side-scrolling perspective that we talked about. What we're seeing might be said to be reminiscent of another game that references the number 8 rather heavily. But that's neither here nor there, and we wouldn't necessarily be so overt as to reference that. But it is somewhat familiar to that game. Next up is the instanced combat screen. And here's where we're going to see what we were talking about in regards to the little trick that the game seems to pull with the player 8 with the references. Obviously, what we're seeing here is a classic Japanese RPG style instanced combat. However, if players look at the user interface, they're going to see a couple of names that they might recognize. And for players who recognize them, it might create the expectation that those are pseudonyms, and the true names of those NPCs or party members are going to be revealed over the course of the game, However, it does seem like those are the true names of the party members, and that does work to pull players into the game world in an interesting way. Or at least it did for this particular player. So, moving right along, this is what the Overworld looks like. It is one of those sorts of games, and players that are familiar with other games from further back in the genre that might rhyme with Zelda. We will just add that the grass can be cut, and yes, it is certainly possible to find in-game objects in the grass. However, of particular note is the simplicity of the user interface. With that said, we'll move right along, and another one of the multiple perspectives that the game employs is this, the visual novel comic book cel-shaded style perspective that we mentioned way back in the Immersion screen. And obviously we've, in the interest of not presenting any spoilers, we've blanked out what the story content is, but this is what one of these story screens is going to look like. There is still another and possibly even a third. And since that's all the screenshots that we have to show off, we're going to move right on to difficulty. The game has earned a 3 out of 15 for difficulty. It does seem to function equally well with a keyboard or a gamepad, without jumping into any additional configuration. It does only present basic difficulty options, that being easy, normal, and difficult, or hard. The descriptions, while brief, are not unhelpful for a player who is new to the particular genre. It certainly seems during all of our evaluation sessions like there were some hidden statistics that players might not be privy to. On the other hand, the user interface is functional and doesn't artificially increase difficulty or prevent the player from having an enjoyable experience. So it's again earned that 3 out of 15, and we're going to show you just what we were talking about. This is the difficulty selection screen. As we said, it does show off, it does provide some guidance on what difficulty option to select. As it says, it can be changed at any time, and it doesn't mention any of the possible hidden statistics, but again, that's going to require the subjectivity hat to suspect that those are going on. So, let's move on, because we do need to talk about the lasting appeal. And then the game is on a 5.4 out of 15 for lasting appeal. By which, of course, we're talking about what is going to motivate the player to play through the game a second time, or keep them playing through the game to the story end. It is a story-based game, so once the players play through the game once, it's not likely to change if they play through it a second time. It is possible that some players will want to attempt the game with a different team or a different profession or different team configurations a second time. It is possible, again, that players will want to play through the game under-leveled, so to speak. It is also possible that once reaching story end, on easy, players may then choose to play through the game on normal or difficult or hard. And unfortunately, the game does lack downloadable content or additional mod support. Again, it is possible that mods do exist for the game, but those mods might require some programming skill to implement. So we aren't going to mention them here. And with that, the less said about that, the better, and we'll move on to the overall score. Overall, the game has earned a 5.13 out of 15. It certainly can be played absent-mindedly. The replay value, because it is a story-based game, does seem somewhat limited to challenge runs or playing on different difficulties, that sort of thing. For players that are looking for a classic type Japanese role-playing game, this might fit the bill, so to speak. On the other hand, and this is, again, putting on the subjectivity hat, we will just reiterate that it does do that interesting little trick with the expectation of a pseudonym from the first two companion party members. There is some interesting audio in the game, so some players may find that 5.13 bumped up to a 6, but for the average player, 5.13. And since there really isn't anything more to say about Bravely Default 2, we'll say congratulations, you've reached the end of the video. Have you played Bravely Default 2? What did you think of it? Comment all that below, leave a suggestion, do the other YouTube things, and that's all from 7th Circle Gaming. Goodbye.